Well, welcome to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Good. Our guest for this episode is once again Dan Ariely, who is the best-selling author of Predictably Irrational, The Upside of Irrationality, and The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. He is also the James B. Duke Professor of Psychology and Behavioral Economics at Duke University and is the founder of the Center for Advanced Hindsight. In this second part of my conversation with Dan, he continues to unpack the nature of our opinions, how they're formed, and how the forces of misinformation can distort them. He once again highlights how anyone, given the right circumstances, can find themselves pulled down what he calls the funnel of misbelief. In this final part of my conversation, we explore the remaining two elements of the funnel of misbelief, focusing on personality and social dynamics. Dan explains why certain personality traits can fuel misconceptions and how social influences such as ostracism and cognitive dissonance play a role. We also discuss the importance of trust in the realm of misbelief and conclude our conversation by me asking Dan why he believes that comparing ourselves to Superman should give us hope. Enjoy. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we engage with esteemed thought leaders and explore research-backed strategies and techniques that empower leaders at every level to achieve meaningful results that drive lasting change. Before we move into the personality one, I just want to kind of just remind our listeners, and I love the analogy or this metaphor you put in the book, that if we were in a boxing match between two legendary fighters, in one corner, the ability to rethink and combat the illusion of explanatory depth, and in the other corner, motivated reasoning would win hands down. That's why I love your solution to this, or an approach to reduce this so that the motivated reasonings for someone believing in something can be minimized.
That's right. And again, it's very easy to think about, oh, it's me versus them, my reasons, my beliefs in the things I believe in are well reasoned, and so on, and the other people are foolish. But in the book, I ask people to reflect about all kinds of their beliefs, and the reality is that there's lots of things that we end up believing just because, and we don't truly understand them, and we haven't truly explored them, and some of it is okay. The world is complex and difficult, and knowledge is hard, and we can't research everything. So we have to have some faith and trust. The third component is the personality component. And here it's important to say that it's not as if there are people who are going to become misbelievers and people who are not. Again, the real determining issue is stress, right? Without stress, people would not become it. With stress, there's a possibility. But there are some personality traits that get people to be more likely to go down the funnel of misbelief, and some that gets people to be less likely. And those are not necessarily all bad traits. Some of those traits are wonderful. For example, in my particular case, one of the beliefs we didn't discuss why I started doing this research, but I started doing this research because I was attacked. There were lots of people who thought that I was one of the people who created the um, COVID pandemic, and they thought that I did this. I got death threats. Actually, my even now, 3 years into it, my university recently got a death threat that they had to refer to the authorities. But one of the things I noticed is that the people who came up with all kinds of stories about me connected all kinds of dots. There's a story. Bill Gates, vaccines, all kinds of things, and they connected the dots. Now, connecting the dots per se is not a bad idea. People who are connecting dots are also more creative, but they also have more of a chance to go down the funnel of misbelief. So there's a couple of personality traits that make it more likely. One of them is connected to the following simple math problem. Okay, so what's the math problem? This is called the bat and the ball. Ready? A baseball bat and a baseball ball cost together $1.10. A baseball bat and a baseball ball cost together $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Now, when you give people this question, the first thing that pops to people's mind is 10 cents. Why? We have $1, $1.10, and so on, 10 cents. And some people, it pops to their mind and they say 10 cents. And some people check themselves. They said, well, it sounds like 10 cents. But it then said that the bat is a dollar more than the ball. So if the ball is 10 cents and the bat is a dollar more, the bat will be a dollar 10. But together they'll be a dollar 20. And Dan said together they're a dollar 10. So that doesn't work. Maybe it's 5 cents and a dollar 5. Yes, the difference is a dollar and together they're a dollar 10. Now, simple math, everybody can do it. But some people, when they see something and it feels right, they just follow that. And some people say, I'm not so sure, let me test it again. Again, you can think about very successful people who would have a good intuition and follow it, right? And you can think about very successful people who would have an intuition and say, let me check it and be sure. The people who see an intuition and follow it are more likely to become misbelievers.
Well, that's part of the cognitive reflection test, and there's 3 questions with that, which really identify if you're really willing to trust and go with your first intuition, or think more slowly, and really everyone can do this and get the right solution. But so many people jump to that first conclusion, and often it's wrong. You're right.
That's right. So we said stress, emotion, we said cognitive, we said personality. And then we have the thing that kind of seals the deal. And the thing that seals the deal is the social force. And the social force is not just social media, it's a social force and it has multiple parts to it. And the first part of the social component is the idea of ostracism. And Ostracism has a beautiful history in terms of research. And the guy who first looked at it is describing the following story. He's saying how he went for a walk with his dog in the park. And all of a sudden, a frisbee fell next to his feet. He picked up the frisbee, threw it to the person that was playing. And to his surprise, the person threw it back to him. And they kept on playing for a few minutes. And all of a sudden, they stopped throwing it to him. And he described how he felt offended. He felt ostracized. Now, he didn't know these people. He didn't come to play the park with them. They owed him nothing. But nevertheless, he felt ostracized. And like every good social scientist, he observed that. He said, let's me experiment with this. And he created an experiment in which a participant was invited to the lab, but they were asked to wait outside. And as they were waiting outside, there were 2 other research assistants. And in half the case, the 2 other research assistants joined this participant. One of them picked a ball and they tossed the ball between the 3 of them for 10 minutes. In the other case, it was all the same. They would toss the ball for 5 minutes, not for 10 minutes. And then for the remaining 5 minutes, they would toss the ball between the 2 research assistants, not tossing it to the research assistant, to the real participant. So we had some people that played for 10 minutes and felt part of the process. And half the people played 5 minutes and then felt ostracized for 5 minutes. And the question was, what would be the difference between those people when they came into the lab? And the results show that basically everything good about humanity went down. They were less optimistic. They were less kind. They gave less to charity. They helped other people less. They cheated more. Feeling ostracized is a very, very painful situation. And I don't know about you, but when I started thinking about misbelief and ostracism, I realized that I have done lots of bad things. And in particular, there was a phrase that I used to love called, what is the color of the sky in your world? And when people would come to me with some strange theory, I would use that phrase. And I thought it was slightly funny, but in retrospect, I think they thought it was very offensive. And if you think about somebody in your circles who is stressed, things are not going well for them, Maybe they feel they've lost their job for no good reason, or they got sick, or something happened. And they start playing with some alternative theories. And they come to us and they start expressing those ideas. Telling them what color is the sky in your world is not the supportive, kind behavior that we would want. It's a behavior that says, go away from here. Right? I'm rejecting you. And of course, that brings us to the next part, which is that once we reject people in today's world, they have places to go. And in particular, the places they have to go are usually online. And today, online, you can find a community that believes in anything you want. So they find a community. And all of a sudden, they feel supported and loved. And they don't need us. They don't need the people in the workplace anymore. By the way, another comment about the workplace. When one of the things that the workplace creates is a group of people that we trust and respect, that if they express different opinions, we listen, right? Because if I work with a group of people and half are on one political spectrum and half are on the other, I can't just discount them. I know these people. I know them well. I've worked with them. I respect them and so on. It actually forces a better conversation. But in a world in which we don't have to meet these people, and we basically go to an online group of only people who are like minded, it's easier, it's simpler, we don't have to confront ideas we don't believe. But it creates a very unhelpful information bubble. But the story doesn't end there, it gets worse. And how does it get worse? It gets worse because of something we call shibolet. And shibolet is a story from the Bible. And the story is that there were these two tribes that had a big fight. After the fight, they settled on two sides of the river. But they wanted to make sure that when they walk around and they meet people, they are from their tribe and not from the opposite tribe. And what happened with these tribes is they pronounce the word of a plant called shibolet in slightly different way. One tribe called it shibolet, and one tribe called it sibolet. So imagine I meet you. I say, hey, you, how do you call this plant? And if you say it the way I say it, I say, oh, brother, you're a part of my tribe. If you say it the way the other tribe does it, I try to chase you, kill you, do something. Now, if you think about what it is that when I show you the plant and I say, what's the name of the plant? Do I care about the name of the plant? No. What am I really asking you? I'm asking you, what's your identity? Right? And we use the term now, shibolet, for a speech that is not about the real thing, but it's a speech about identity. That your answer is not about the truth. Your answer is about who are you? Now, it's very confusing when speech becomes this way. So for example, as a university professor, there's lots of discussion in universities about gender. What do I think that when people say things like there's no gender, do they really mean it, or is it a shibboleth? Do they really mean it, or they want to say, look what a left-leaning person, liberal person I am? And the same thing is happening on the other side. I think there's more and more speech that is not at all about honesty. It's really about a speech that's saying, look what a good whatever I am, good Republican, good Democrat, good liberal, good conservative. And the last component of the social element is what's called cognitive dissonance. And everybody heard about cognitive dissonance. We all use the term, but we don't always use it right. So let's remind ourselves about the basics of cognitive dissonance. So the story of cognitive dissonance is that Leon Festinger heard that there was this woman who said that on a particular date, the earth will be flooded and destroyed. And only her supporters would stay alive because the aliens would come and would save them. Okay. And Festinger wondered what would happen the next day when her followers would wake up and realize the world did not get destroyed. How unhappy would they be? Now, think about two types of followers. Think about on the fence followers. People who said, I'm not sure if this woman is correct or not correct, but let me hang out around here anyway, just in case. And diehard followers that sold their property and gave everything away and said goodbye to their families and so on. Who would be more upset? You could say the diehard followers will be more upset. These are the people that lost more because they trusted her. They sold their property, they said goodbye, they did all kinds of things. But Festinger thought the opposite would happen. He thought that the people who were on the fence said, you know what? We're on the fence. We weren't sure. We showed up. She's not a true prophet. Let's go home. But he said that the diehard followers would have a cognitive dissonance. Their actions of giving up, selling, saying goodbye, and so on, how could they reconcile it with nothing happened? Now, they gave their property, they said goodbye, they can't undo it. What would they do? They would change their beliefs. And what they end up doing, and he was correct, is they ended up saying that she's actually the one who saved the earth. So they couldn't say, oh, I was wrong. They said, oh, she is so amazing, even more amazing than what we thought. In fact, she's the one who saved the earth with her insight and this and so on. She's the one who saved it. And they spent more time with her and helped her raise more followers and raise more money and so on. And the idea of cognitive dissonance is that it's very hard for us to admit mistakes. And once we act in a certain way, our preferences in that direction become stronger. Now, what that means is that if people start going down a certain misbelief, it's going to be very hard for them to say, oh, we were wrong. Let's change it. By the way, it's wrong for all of us, it's difficult for all of us. And instead, what is much more likely is people would strengthen their beliefs and expand those. So that means that if somebody adopted misbeliefs on cancer, on vaccines, on COVID, on global warming, on whatever, voting, it's going to be very unlikely they'll say one day, oh, we were wrong. Instead, what they would most likely do is further strengthen their beliefs. And every time they act, every time they post something, they do something, they go to demonstrate, they write something, it actually would strengthen their beliefs. Now, all of this I think, is a very compelling story of thinking about what we have, as humanity, what we have created, and what a dangerous trap for information and knowledge and misbelief we have created. But the bigger picture in all of this is, of course, trust. And as we said, misbelief is about not just about believing in something that is wrong, it's about adopting a perspective that is a suspecting perspective about life. What else are they not telling us? Who else is trying to get me? When we think about belief in God, God is usually good. Yes, sometimes there's a devil, sometimes there's a competition, but mostly if you believe in God, you believe the world is mostly good with some deviations. But being a misbeliever is actually a very tough weight. You wake up in the morning and you believe that there's a cabal of evil people that is out there to get you. You believe that they're incredibly powerful and devious, and they're trying all kinds of things to destroy humanity. That's a very, very tough way to live. But the moment you adopt it and you look at everything this way, it's very, very tough, and we lose trust. Now, society, to a very large degree, is working on trust in all kinds of ways. We trust that somebody inspected the elevators. It means we trusted that somebody inspect the lettuce that we buy, it was actually washed. And we trust that somebody is controlling the fertilizers for the fruit that we eat. The banks are going to give us our money. The amount of trust that we have, it's unbelievable. There's this story there's a, that fish don't know that they're in the water because it's just everywhere. I think in the same way we don't understand how much trust we have because it's everywhere. The moment you start thinking about it, you realize, oh my goodness. Just think about how much trust we have in our cars. You're driving 60 miles per hour in something, and you feel, you trust that if you press the brake, it will work, or if you turn the wheel, it would. I mean, it's kind of amazing, right? Not to mention we're on planes and all kinds of things. So what do we do in society when we have misbelief? And misbelief is really about the erosion of trust. How does that work for us?
And once that spiral of mistrust begins, someone needs to make the first move, right, to break that cycle, which means extending trust rather than doubling down on mistrust. But in our social relationships, the question is really who should make that first move?
When I started writing this book, I thought I'll have a chapter on solutions. As you know, I don't have a chapter on solution. I have these sections called Hopefully Helpful, in which I think there's some things we can do now, but I think that the problem is bigger than I thought, more urgent, and I think we have to figure out that it's a big problem and we should make it a priority. But your question, I think, is on all levels. So, for example, think about romantic love between partners. I think that if one person loves the other person more and becomes more vulnerable, the other person can in turn discover more love in them. What is the potential of love? We can bicker and ego protect and this, or we can say, we can declare love, we can create trust, we can do this. And I think every couple could do better, but one person has to start trusting and being vulnerable and expressing love and so on. And the same thing is true for our world. Where is the trust is coming from? Now, when we think about companies, um, one of the things that companies do unintentionally to show lack of trust is bureaucracy. Companies come to you and they say, okay, you can go and have lunch, but I need 16 different documentation and a video of the whole thing. And plus, I have all these documents. I don't really trust you. I don't really care about your time. I don't want to do anything different. So, whether it's individual to individual, romantic love, friendship, family, work, relationship with the government, trust is needed. And I think that the entity with the more power in the relationship should be the one who show trust first.
Well, and even though we've talked about these sequentially, like you mentioned in the book, they all are happening at the same time, interplaying with one another, the emotional, the cognitive, the personality, and the social aspects of misbelief. So it's helpful to break them apart and speak about them individually, but realize that they're all operating in unison together and amplifying, in some cases, effects for the positive or the negative pieces, right?
That's right. Yes. Now it is true that the funnel is an important concept because it describes a process that takes some time. And it's also important to realize that when we see people starting down on that funnel, they can still be saved. But if we wait too long and all the four elements are strong and they already have all of their friends are in the from misbelievers and so on, then it's very, very hard to push them back. So like lots of things, we have to pay attention to the early signs, like in healthcare. We think about early detection is a key. The same thing is true for misbelief. Early detection is a key.
That's important. And you end the book, which I love, is, what gives you hope is the comparison to Superman. This comparison between Superman and regular humans might be somewhat discouraging, but there's another way to look at it.
Yeah, yeah. So we look at Superman and say, "Oh, Superman is so capable. We're so fragile." But we've gone such a long way. We can fly planes. We can be in the cold with sweaters and heaters. Yeah, we can speak over great distances, like I'm doing right with you with technology. So we've taken our fragile, physical, limited bodies, and we created a technology layer around them that allows us to see in the dark and live in the cold and fly and do all kinds of amazing things. What about our cognitive system? Our cognitive system is just as fragile as our physical system, maybe even more. But instead of creating a system that supports it, that allows us to be the Superman of the minds, we have created a system that takes advantage of that. For example, social media or cryptocurrency. Well, some of cryptocurrency, some of it is great, some of it is more complex. But I think what we need to understand is we need to understand that we could do much better, but we need a system that helps us. And the moment we understand it, for example, we've said a few not so pleasant things about social media in this discussion. I'm not against social media. I think getting people to know each other, making it easy to communicate with other people from other parts of the world, there's lots of potential good things about it, but the details are crucial. And the details have to be details that fit with our ability and enhance, make us more like Superman rather than make us less like Superman. And I think we can get there. But the first thing we have to do is we have to realize we're not going in the right direction and we have to fix some things.
And it's easy to see that in other people, but to bring them out of that funnel sooner, it's probably harder to do so in yourself. But ultimately, realizing that you can be just as susceptible as anyone else. You have a great example of the anatomy of a conspiracy theory and how easy it is to believe when you add social proof, video proof, and expert testimony into it so that people feel compelled and drawn into that funnel quite easily. And it's a mistake. It's a situation that anyone can overcome or can be susceptible to. It's not just the other people; it's all of us. And looking out for these road marks, these indicators is really helpful before you get, like you said, too far into that funnel, and it's really then difficult to pull yourself out.
Absolutely. So that's the positive side. We can do better on the individual level. We can help the people around us. I think a organization and companies have things to do. And then on the bigger level, we have to make it a top priority. In 10 years ago, you asked me what are the challenges that are facing humanity. Misinformation would not have been one of them. If you ask me now, I think that almost anything we want to do, unless we fix this problem, we're not going to be able to do together.
Absolutely, completely agree. Before we end each episode, I always like to ask the final question, and that's a call to action. What would you recommend our listeners doing first to identify for themselves or for others when they're susceptible or going into that funnel of misbelief?
So I would say two things. The first thing I would say, if you are experiencing a lot of stress in yourself or you think other people, that's a very worrisome starting point. The second thing I would say is work on your own resilience. Work on your own resilience. Invest in your social connection, invest in your resilience. It's one of the best protections against the ups and downs of life, including the temptation to go down the funnel of misbelief.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, for joining me today. Really appreciated our conversation. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you and learn more about your work.
So I have a website, danariely.com, DANARIELY.com. Lots of things there.
I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.